Thanks for joining Samba TV's State of Viewership webinar. My name is Cole Strain, and I am the VP of Research and Development here at Samba TV. I get to spend my days researching viewership behavior and trying to better understand advertising effectiveness.
And I'm Becca Fine, Associate Director of Marketing Insights and Content here at Samba, where I dig into TV viewership and advertising trends to shed light on how the industry is constantly changing.
Today, we're going to share some insight on the latest viewership trends after analyzing 45 billion hours of linear and streaming viewership from the first half of this year. We're going to dive into some campaign strategies as well for the upcoming holiday season. It's coming up on us. But before we dive in, a couple of administrative notes. So first, we are going to welcome your questions throughout this. So please submit questions through the Zoom Q&A feature at any time during the webinar. We are saving a few minutes at the end to address these questions live. And then number two, we will be doing live polling, and this is a fun and interactive portion of the webinar. So when you see a polling question pop up in Zoom, feel free to answer if you'd like to participate in this today. All right. With all that said, let's do a quick introduction of Samba TV so you have a rough understanding of what we do and where this data comes from. Samba TV is a pioneer in automatic content recognition, also known as ACR technology. The ACR tech allows us to capture viewership from over 20 different brands of smart TV globally. We then augment this first-party ACR data with third-party set-top box data through data partnerships. Combined, this gives us a full visibility of around 48 million global TV devices, which is, a lot of viewership. Two big things I'd like everyone to understand as we get into the insights. First, Samba TV is the only independent TV ACR company, meaning we're not owned by one of the TV brands. Instead, we are the ACR partner for over 20 brands globally. The diversity of TVs here is really important because it actually helps us better understand that our data is truly representative. We capture data from all manner of TVs, all combination of features, and TVs available at all price points. Beyond this, all Samba TVs analyzed are 100% opted in. And when folks opt in, they are opting in directly into Samba TV. So this combination of represented plus opted in data, it gives us a powerful ability to generate insights on linear, streaming consumption, advertising consumption, and produce cool studies like this to help us all keep pace with the rapidly changing world of TV viewership. All right, you have a familiarity with our data, you know about the interactive part. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Becca. Becca, how's TV trending?
Yeah, there's linear and SVOD and AVOD, FAST, the streaming wars, a lot going on in the TV landscape, so let's jump right in. So we saw in the first half of 2024 that OTT viewership increased by 40% and actually reached a record high. Perhaps in the past, this might have been troubling news for advertisers who rely on linear TV to reach wide audiences. But in the past year or so, we've seen that every major streaming service has now launched an ad-supported option. So the opportunities to advertise across OTT platforms has also hit a record high. We also saw that over half of SVOD signups in 2024 were ad-supported. So consumers are definitely showing willingness to watch ads in exchange for lower fees, meaning that advertisers have tons of new places to reach consumers. So people are streaming, which is great news for advertisers, great news for platforms, but the trouble comes with retention. So across these major streaming services, we oftentimes see that viewers are coming in for one piece of original programming, watching it, and then putting that platform out of sight, out of mind for the next several months. Like on Hulu, for example, we saw that 69% of viewing households watched just one original, and it was most likely to be Shogun. For platforms, it's essential to find creative ways to engage audiences with the broader content library and really see the value of their subscriptions beyond just one new program. And one way we've seen this work is through bundling, like with the Disney bundle and Apple One, which we've seen lower churn rate considerably. And then the other thing we've seen mitigate churn, or at least get people to re-engage with a platform, is, of course, quality content. So this chart is showing the percent of viewers in H1 2024 that did not watch an original on the platform in H2 2023. And of that group, what program was most likely to bring people back? So for Peacock, you can see that about 2/3 of viewers didn't watch in 2023, and it was likely TED that drew them back in. On the flip side of that, only 1/4 of Netflix viewers didn't watch in 2023. But of the cyclers who came back, it was actually a live streaming event, the John Mulaney special that brought them back to the platform. For me, nothing will top New in Town, but it is interesting to see that Netflix's kind of foray into live events is re-engaging these subscription cyclers. And now for our first polling question of the day. These are fun, and I do get weirdly competitive to see if we can stump the audience. So please respond to the prompt in Zoom. And the question is, which genre has the highest binge rate? Is it A, comedy, B, crime, C, mystery, or D, docuseries? All right, let's let some votes come in here. All right, the answer is, yep, the audience got it. It's D for docuseries. Yeah, so quarter after quarter, we've seen people love to binge, but some new data shows that not all genres are created equal when it comes to binging. So you can see docuseries had the highest binge rate here, whereas comedies and dramas were quite a bit lower there. Feels relatable to me when I'm watching something suspenseful, maybe a little spooky. I want to finish it and figure out who done it. But with something a little easier, like a comedy, more down to just let the good times roll. The most surprising and somewhat inexplicable piece of data here is the geo findings, which show that households in warmer DMAs like Houston and Orlando were more likely to binge than those in colder places like Pittsburgh and Seattle. We may never know why. We'll see how global warming plays into this, but we thought it was cool and fun. And in terms of the shows that saw the highest binge rates, again, it was all Netflix, which is perhaps more a reflection of Netflix being the only platform that does bulk releases, thereby allowing us to binge. So Max, Amazon Prime, if you're listening, feel free to take note here. If you release it in bulk, we will binge it. And then in terms of when people start new shows, we saw this half that in the first 50 days of release, over 3/4 of viewers are going to watch in the first 15 days. And by day 31, about 1 month post-release, over 90% of viewers have already watched these new popular shows. It's pretty crazy. One of the big differentiators of streaming is that it's on demand. The content is literally at our fingertips. But once these shows are no longer part of the cultural conversation, the water cooler talk has faded, they're not really being discovered anymore. Makes it super essential for platforms to drive early awareness within that first 2-week window. It's also essential to actually advertise into that 2-week window rather than cut ads off after a few days post-premiere, since we do see a lot of viewership occur between days 4 and 15. We did see one major exception to the rule this half. That was Baby Reindeer, a very disturbing but very good show, which actually saw 60% of its viewership occur after the first 15 days. So word of mouth got people to watch Baby Reindeer, but that's just one way of many ways that people hear about new shows. There's also social media, in-app suggestions, and of course, everyone's favorite, TV advertising. So how effective are ads in getting people to watch new shows? We used our tune-in rate measurement product across a few major releases from 2024. And we saw that for each, there was a substantial increase among households that saw ads against those that did not see ads. So for House of the Dragon, for example, exposed audiences were almost 5 times more likely to watch than those who were unexposed to ads. This is great news for advertisers. Advertising works. And this type of kind of advanced measurement can shed light on the tactics and the creatives that are really moving the needle. All right, over to you, Cole, to talk about some of the biggest TV moments of the half.
Absolutely. So what's big in TV this year? Well, we have streaming and then we have sports, linear. Then we have linear. We have streaming, and then we have linear, is what I meant to say. But as we dive into the linear viewership trends, it really is about sports. What we're seeing is that 86 of the top 100 linear programs were sporting events. The only program that managed to crack into the top 5 for linear was a full-blown presidential debate. We did see that the Super Bowl led the pack here with the highest linear viewership of the game since the pre-pandemic era. While linear TV remains the home for sports, we actually do see a lot more games moving into the streaming space. And so we do expect to see this composition change over time. So when we look at non-sports programs, we can see that linear is still the home also for cultural moments. The Oscars, the Grammys, these are things that are taking the top positions in the ranking. We do see some truly enviable viewership numbers here from Tracker, but as a program that debuted immediately following the Super Bowl, in my mind, it will always be a little bit sports. As we dive into other sporting events from H1, we see that women's sports has really taken off, and this is being spearheaded by women's basketball. The Women's March Madness Championship game overtook the men's game for total viewers for the first time ever, with 12.2 million households turning into the game. We also saw that the full Women's March Madness tournament had just about as many viewers as the Trump-Biden debate. We also saw huge viewership coming from the WNBA this year. Just as an example, the highest reaching WNBA game of 24 was the Connecticut Sun versus Indiana Fever game, with 1.7 million viewers watching. This game was had almost 50% more viewers than any regular season game from 23, a huge increase in viewership. We see this trend continue through to the Olympics as well. Total Olympics viewership was up 11%, and the highest watched single event was women's gymnastics. We do have a whole Olympics report up on our site for folks who are interested. But for now, I think that's enough on sports. Let's dive into streaming. And let's do it in a fun way. Let's do a poll. So what do we think? Which show had the highest season premiere viewership for the first half of 24? Was it Fool Me Once? Was it House of the Dragon, Bridgerton, or Griselda? All right, a few seconds to let these come in. And if you said House of the Dragon, well, then I fooled you once. Aha. I'm sorry, but it was too good. Fool Me Once was actually the top viewed program of H1, the top viewed streaming original of H1. So let's dive in to see how this looks. When it comes to streaming originals, Netflix continues to dominate. Our living room screens are receiving half of the top streaming shows directly from Netflix, including Fool Me Once, which was the top viewed streaming program of H1 with 3.8 million viewing households tuning in. This just overtook House of the Dragon as the top streaming H1 program, and by less than 200,000 households. But I really wanted to call out the difference in viewership behavior that we're seeing here. Now, Fool Me Once had a very respectable 1.3 million households tune in the first 4 days. But compare this to the staggering 2.8 million households who watched House of the Dragon on that opening weekend. Fool Me Once just didn't have the same premiere urgency that House of the Dragon did, and folks were willing to take a little bit more time. But as you look over the next 11 days, you really see things start to pick up. Fool Me Once had more day 5 to day 15 viewership than any other program from the first half of the year. This is an important lesson. Viewership habits are changing. It's a video on demand world. We don't have to watch on the premiere weekend, at least not in the way that we used to. However, we still do need to discover the program. And as Becca pointed out, those first 15 days are still critical for the overall viewership of the program. So, small reminder, keep the ads running for 15 days post-premiere. Make sure that you're capturing as much of that viewership as possible. I do want to talk a little bit more about House of the Dragon, because this was a huge hit from the first half of the year. And one of the things I'm always interested in is what are these cross-platform synergies that we see? So we wanted to see what these folks were watching on other platforms. And perhaps unsurprisingly, we did see that high overlap with other dark sci-fi, dark sort of superhero programs like Acolyte and The Boys, high overlap with House of the Dragon. And maybe a little more surprisingly, we saw some high overlap with historic fiction in Shogun and the deep sci-fi epic, which was the Three Body Problem. Um, the point here is that sometimes what we can see in the data is intuitive, but sometimes we're kind of guessing. And so it's always better to use the data to help understand where the overlaps are within your audience. One more example of this as we talk about streaming shows. Let's get in and talk about Shogun. Shogun was a fantastic show, one of my favorites from the first half, and a mini phenomenon in its own right. It had 10 weeks at the top of our most streamed program list, and it earned Hulu some very excellent viewership numbers throughout the season. But what I thought was the most interesting for Shogun was how much of a destination this really became for viewers. So on average, we saw that 70% of households had no viewership in the 30 minutes prior to watching Shogun. Essentially, they were turning on their TVs to watch the program. Similarly, we saw that 91% of households had no viewership in the 30 minutes after Shogun. They were turning off their TVs when the show was done. So for a lot of folks, the only reason why you visited the TV at all was to go and watch Shogun. This program was the destination for them for that evening. All right, that's enough about content, at least for now. But, as I like to call it, content is just the stuff between the ads. So, Becca, what's going on in ads land?
All right, everyone's favorite topic. Let's talk about advertising. So looking at the brands that serve the highest number of ad impressions this half, I can see there's a lot of familiar faces here, the insurance and QSR brands that typically top the leaderboard, the comfort advertisers, if you will, like Progressive and Domino's and Liberty Mutual. But we did see some notable newcomers to the list as well. Some pet food brands like Purina and the Farmer's Dog, along with electronics brands like Consumer Cellular at number 8 there. At the overall level, we actually saw that pet advertising was the category that saw the highest year-over-year increase in ad impressions, with people just really doubling down on their COVID dogs. And then with the holiday season coming up, wanted to do a little deep dive into retail as well. And interestingly, we saw that most of the top retailers actually cooled down their impressions from last year. We know that a lot of the retail industry is shifting ad impressions to digital. So that might be why we're seeing these brands like Macy's, Walmart, and Target driving yearly decreases. One other interesting thing we looked at here was the TV viewership habits of people shopping at some of these big stores like Walmart and Target. And we saw that they streamed a lot of Netflix and then on linear watched lifestyle networks like the Cooking Channel, for example. Definitely good for advertisers to keep this in mind when they're lighting these big holiday buys. These shoppers are all about the Bridgerton. So we've been monitoring oversaturation for a while now, and we actually saw that it got worse this half. So throughout H1, 94% of TV ad impressions were served to just 55% of TV viewers, those heavy and medium viewers who maintain a pretty high level of linear consumption. This was an increase of 2 percentage points year over year, so clearly the need to balance reach and frequency is at really an all-time high. And then I would be remiss not to mention that there is an election coming up very soon, even if I'm trying not to think about it. But we are closely monitoring the election and seeing some interesting trends. So this report was measuring H1 2024. Biden was still in the race, and before dropping out, he actually served 5 times as many ads as Trump did. From a demo standpoint, we saw that both candidates reached a disproportionately white audience, though, while each under-indexed among Hispanic audiences. And then, as Cole mentioned earlier, the debate in June was also a huge TV event with over 25 million households watching. And we kind of zeroed in on some key swing states here and saw that households in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin were more likely to watch than the average US household, but Nevada and Georgia were more likely to skip it. We'll be closely monitoring the upcoming debate on September 10th, assuming it's still on. So stay tuned for insights on that one. Then we just talked about politics, so that just leaves AI in terms of hot ticket items to discuss here. So this data shows a little sneak peek of some new AI technology that we released to help advertisers gain a full understanding of everything seen on screen. The example here shows how HP used Samba AI to understand the value of its Real Madrid sponsorship during a UEFA Champions League game. You can see that about 500,000 US households saw the HP logo during the event at an average frequency of 17. The possibilities to use this technology are super exciting in understanding the holistic picture of sponsorships, ads, and really everything in between that audiences are seeing on the screen. All right, now for a little change in gears, let's get festive and talk about the holidays.
Folks, I know it's early. I mean, we just started seeing 12-foot skeletons appear at hardware stores like in the last couple of weekends. But we do have to plan ahead, so we're going to get into some of these holiday tactics. But, we want to provide you some data and hopefully make this a slightly more successful holiday season. But first, I want to do a pure curiosity ask. What are you watching first this year? Is this Elf, Christmas Vacation, Home Alone, The Santa Claus? There's a lot of holiday classics out there, but what are we watching first? All right, the votes come in. Elf. Man, Elf has it. Home Alone high on the list. Great responses. Well, if you chose Elf, now there's a lot of people who think the way that you do about the holiday classics. Elf is currently the largest, or what we saw last year as the largest holiday classic in terms of overall viewership. The viewing of holiday classics is absolutely something of a tradition in many, many households. My family watched It's a Wonderful Life for Christmas for most years of my childhood. I'd argue that Elf and Santa Claus are more fun. At least my kiddos appear to think so. But beyond the classics, there's a lot of solid reach to be had from new holiday films that are coming online each year, each looking to become a classic in their own right. So last year's new editions of Best Christmas Ever, Family Switch, and Candy Cane Lane all had very solid reach numbers. And some of them would even be competing for our top streaming program spots from the data that we just showed you. So very solid reach numbers on new holiday movies. But it's important to keep in mind that not all reach is created equal. As we evaluate who we're reaching, you can see that households with kids are really fans of new holiday films, much like mine, right? It worked out. Older audiences tend to enjoy the older classics, and, white households are going to over-index for holiday films of all kinds. Interestingly, we did find another fun geographic insight that we're still trying to make some sense of. But we saw the highest indices, the over-indexing for viewership of the holiday films come from Boston, Cleveland, and Philadelphia. And then we saw some significant under-indexing in the warmer DMAs. While we're still trying to fully make sense of what's going on with the geography-related viewership patterns, this is something we need to be aware of as we consider how to use this data and make the most of it for upcoming holiday trends. Just because it's snowing outside some of our windows doesn't mean the rest of the country is quite ready for the holiday season yet. So keep that in mind as you're planning. All right, that was the high level. Let's go ahead and take us into some more tactical insights as we get into the first, as we plan for the upcoming holiday season. And I'll go ahead and take this first one. So the first recommendation is diversify your buy. AVOD, FAST, digital targeting are all viable strategies to reach that half of the viewership population that isn't really spending as much time on TV. Those light TV viewers that are harder to reach on linear, make sure you use data and alternative buying methods to tap into that very significant portion of the population.
All right, number two, cost-effective tentpole targeting. These events like the Macy's Day Parade and these big NFL games draw a huge audience, but they're also extremely expensive to advertise in. So we would encourage you to use TV data to target viewers of these tentpoles on their digital devices. You're still going to reach that super key audience, and you're going to save a bunch of money doing so.
Purchase-based targeting would probably be the next recommendation. I mean, if there's a time of year to use it, it's the holiday season. So understand what your buyers, which categories they are purchasing against, and then use that with TV data in order to create the custom audience segments you're looking for to reach the actual folks you are trying to reach.
For those streamers releasing new holiday movies and shows, can't wait to watch them. You should optimize release schedules by advertising in mid-November with campaigns that run for at least 2 weeks. We've seen that people are most likely to watch new shows in that first 2-week window. So that's when your ads are going to make the most impact.
Next recommendation is to measure, help maintain your audiences, help drive retention. There's many ways that this can be done at Samba TV. TV TuneIn is our flagship outcomes measurement product where we help folks understand how their ads are relating to the overall viewership they're receiving. Figure out how your measurement strategy is going to impact your ad campaign in the back half of the year.
And then finally, make sure you quantify brand sponsorships. We saw earlier that Samba AI can provide insights on when and how your brand's logo appears on the TV that really help to truly quantify the impact of your campaign.
Okay.
All right, that concludes our presentation. Now we're going to start answering your questions live. Don't worry if we don't get to your question today. Our team will be sure to follow up in the coming days to make sure you get your answers. All right, let's take a look here. Cole, you want to take the first one?
Sure. So it does look like we have a couple of questions here related to audience targeting. So let me just give you an overview of how that works here at Samba. So Samba, in addition to our TV assets, we do have an identity graph. It's 106 million households in the United States. Essentially what this allows us to do is create the viewership data that we've got from our ACR, and then be able to apply this to the identity graph so that you're able to reach these folks. And the common applications here are going to be based on the content that they have watched or based on the ads that they have seen. So if they have yet to see your ad on linear, you have the opportunity to reach them through a digital format, including CTV. Combining that with the purchase-based segments that we were talking about earlier, we do work with Affinity in order to be able to receive purchase-based data, so that this allows you to do things such as, category purchasers who have yet to see your linear ad, so that you can go reach them in more digital or addressable sort of formats. So that might be the combination. Tentpole targeting here is going to fall into a similar sort of vein, right? So actually reaching people, the Super Bowl is always the common example, but reaching people during the Super Bowl can be an expensive proposition. But reaching people after the Super Bowl who also watch the Super Bowl is a far more efficient way to reach the exact same population in an addressable and measurable format.
All right. Couple question here about political. What trends have you seen since Kamala joined the race? So been monitoring the election very closely since Kamala joined. I believe we've done a couple data polls, one on the DNC, and then one on the interview that she and Tim Walz did on CNN last week. And thinking back for the DNC, I believe we saw about 30% more households watch that than the RNC. And from a demo standpoint, there were some differences there as well. I think we saw Black households over-indexed for DNC viewership and under-indexed on the RNC. And then we also pulled some interesting kind of swing state stats as well. Pennsylvania showed more interest in the CNN interview than they had for some prior political events. So potentially an indication that her joining the race was compelling for Pennsylvania households. And we do have a political report coming out next week, so we'll be diving deeper into that then. So definitely check that out when it comes out next Thursday.
All right, folks, I am getting the signal that we are out of time. So thank you again so much for tuning in to this webinar today. Hope you found it insightful, maybe a couple strategies you can use for the upcoming holiday season. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. You can reach us on the website. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can give us a call. We're happy to chat. As mentioned, you can download the State of Viewership report or our Olympics report or any of the other great studies that we've referenced are all up on our website. We will be shooting around this presentation for everyone to see. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a fantastic Thursday, and we hope you enjoy your day.